Christopher Paul Curtis, the author of Watson's Go to Birmingham, was born in Flint, Michigan in 1953, which was a prominent setting and location in the novel. Curtis is an African-American male best known for the Newbery Medal-winning Bud Not Buddy in the critically acclaimed The Watsons Go to Birmingham in 1963. Curtis often sets his books in his hometown of Flint and draws from his own life and that of his family in creating both stories and characters. Curtis did not intend to write specifically for children, but he felt that his stories were best told from a child's perspective. The characters' experiences were often colored by events from Curtis's own life, and the tales were told in a fresh, original voice that appealed to young readers. Although he addresses challenging issues such as racism, poverty, homelessness, hunger, and child abuse, he balances these topics with an upbeat approach that emphasizes self-respect, the acceptance of life and its challenges, and the healing quality of family love.
The publication of The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, made a real difference in my life, complete difference in my life. For the first time, I was doing something that I enjoyed doing. I was successful at it. I was able to, with the success came financial success too. So I was able to buy things that before I wasn't able to buy. And I discovered that there's just nothing in the world like doing something that you enjoy and being able to make a living at it. So The Watsons Go to Birmingham is, I've said this a lot of times, has always been my favorite book. One of the reasons was it got me, I was working in a warehouse at the time, and because of that book, I don't work in a warehouse anymore. One of the ways I get through life is by having very low expectations. That way you don't get nasty surprises. So when the book did well and it started to win awards, I go into kind of a shell, I think, and it's great to hear these things, but I don't really buy them. And I think that's a good protective mechanism because bad things that you hear as well, you don't really buy them. You realize, okay, that's good to hear something like that. I didn't really realize how well the Watsons was doing because you're with your royalty period, you're like a year behind from what the sales are. So it wasn't until then, but I thought I was doing really well when I got a call from a principal in Michigan who had read the book, and I was working in a warehouse unloading trucks at the time, and he said that he wanted me to come speak. And I thought, okay, you want me to come speak? And he said, and we don't have a lot of money to pay you. And I thought, okay, $20, I'll be there. And he said, we have $300. I remember almost dropping the phone, $300. I said, yeah, okay, I'll be there. Because I was making $300 a week in the warehouse.
During the beginning of the story, after the family is introduced, Kenny, the youngest of the three siblings, lays out the details of attending school at Clark Elementary. Almost 10 years prior, in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in a Brown v. Board of Education that segregation in schools was unconstitutional. Although this ruling was in effect, it is said that by the end of the 50s, still less than 10% of African American children were enrolled in integrated schools. This issue was still very prominent during this time setting of the story. Also, during the time of the narrative, President John F. Kennedy was elected into presidency in 1960. In his time as president, the civil rights movement thrived and progressed. Kennedy defined the civil rights crisis as moral as well as constitutional and legal. He intended his legislation to guarantee equal access to public facilities, to end segregation in education, and to provide federal protection of the right to vote. Martin Luther King Jr. lived in the same era as JFK, with the same cause, but they had a complicated relationship. King described Birmingham, Alabama as the most segregated city in America. This city was one of the main settings in the book and was also the location of many campaigns and mass protests in which Martin Luther King Jr. led. Kennedy sent troops into Alabama in order to calm things down. In the spring of 1963, the year the Watsons drove to Alabama, activists in Birmingham launched one of the most influential campaigns of the civil rights movement, Project C, better known as the Birmingham Campaign. It would be the beginning of a series of lunch counter sit-ins, marches on City Hall, and boycotts on downtown merchants to protest segregation laws in the city. Over the next couple months, the peaceful demonstrations would be met with violent attacks using high-pressure fire hoses and police dogs on men, women, and children, producing some of the most iconic and troubling images of the civil rights movement. President John F. Kennedy would later say, The events in Birmingham have so increased the cries for equality that no city or state or legislative body can prudently choose to ignore them. It is considered one of the major turning points in the civil rights movement and the beginning of the end of a centuries-long struggle for freedom. Later in that same year, on September 15, 1963, an unforgettable rebuttal to peaceful campaigning shook the nation in Birmingham, Alabama at the 16th Street Baptist Church. This is the same event that is presented and is at the climax of the Watsons Go to Birmingham novel. This event took the lives of 4 innocent little girls after dynamite planted under the church steps by members of the Ku Klux Klan exploded. Martin Luther King Jr. described this event to be one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity. In a different light, many different aspects of popular culture during this time period were mentioned in the book. Kinney describes his mother as acting like Eliot Ness, the cop from the popular Untouchables TV show, when she busted open the bathroom door to get to Byron. This show was introduced in 1959 and lasted until the last episode was made in 1963. The Magnificent Seven was a movie mentioned by Brother Byron when he tried to explain what a peon was to Kinney. This movie was made in 1960 and was very popular in this time. Songs also played a part in the popular culture mentioned in the book. Kinney's favorite song was Yakety Yak, an up-tempo, doo-wop style lyric performed by the Coasters in the late 1950s. This song spent 7 whole weeks in the number 1 R&B charts and 1 week as number 1 on the Pop Top 100.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Don't talk, man. Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night. Don't talk.
Kinney's mom also had a favorite song. Under the Boardwalk by the Drifters is mentioned in the novel. This song is still very popular today, even though it debuted in the early 1960s and was charted on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time.
Oh, when the sun goes down and burns the tar up on the roof, and your shoes get so hot, you wish your tired feet were fireproof. Under the boardwalk, down by the sea, yeah. On a blanket with my baby's where I'll be.
The setting of the Watsons Go to Birmingham starts out in Flint, Michigan in 1963. Michigan is very cold and has harsh winters, which Mama did not like. The Watsons end up taking a road trip to Birmingham, Alabama, because Byron, their oldest son, was acting out. Alabama is much warmer, not only in temperature, but also because it was during the heat of racist breakouts. Being in the South, Alabama is much more racist than Michigan. There were segregated bathrooms, dining halls, movie theaters, water fountains, and schools. Whites and blacks were wanted to be completely separated because they were seen as being unequal. This book took place during the Civil Rights Movement in the United States when racism was as prevalent as ever.